The officials, folks, for the 2023 Rugby World Cup have been named. We have 12 refs, 7 assistant refs, and 7 TMOs who will be heading over to France for the tournament. We'll go through the list pretty quickly, and you guys can let us know your thoughts. There's obviously a couple of absentees as well. But of the 12 referees named, who are going to be the ones mainly in the spotlight, all of them refed one game in the Six Nations 2023, the men's Six Nations, obviously. So that was kind of a wee, I guess, trial run to see which guys were on form to make the Rugby World Cup, because there's no kind of bolter ref who has not refereed a game in the Six Nations who's been kind of appointed to the World Cup. There are a couple who refereed games at the Six Nations who've not made the World Cup in a refereeing capacity, but we'll get to them in a second. Of the ones who are in attendance, there are 4 from England. That's Wayne Barnes, Matt Carley, Carl Dixon, and Luke Pearce. You would think Wayne Barnes, being the most experienced and the elder statesman at 44 years old of all those referees, he's probably in line to get a final if England do not make the final. So that would be a guess, and I don't think that would be a particularly insightful guess. I think most people would probably put money on Barnesy to get the final if he does make it. Of those 4 English refs, Carl Dixon, for me, I don't really care that much about refs. If you've watched this channel any length of time, it's not something I really focus on that much. But Carl Dixon is kind of for mine, the most loose cannon of the refs. I am not a guy who likes studying rugby laws, reading them over and over again, because, man, often, the referees have got different interpretations, or the laws won't change, but the World Rugby will have some initiative that, they need to interpret something a different way, even if the wording doesn't change. So my way of judging it is usually by, I watch enough games. What do most referees do when something similar to that happens? And then you'll see, especially when it's head contact and stuff, you can kind of see most of them going through a process. If there's one guy who I will think what decision he's going to make is more of a roll of the dice than predictable, for me, it's Carl Dixon. As I said, I find him personally a bit of a loose cannon, but yeah, there you go. There's a couple of Aussies, Nick Berry and Angus Gardner. Now, Nick Berry, obviously been in the firing line a little bit. He had the Lions tour thing with Rusty Erasmus not too long ago. And Wayne Smith, the professor here in New Zealand, kind of singled out a game that he was in control of recently for being virtually unwatchable. 5 yellow cards and a bunch of penalties in that game. So Wayne Smith, I don't think, is a fan of old Nick Berry. A couple of New Zealanders, Ben O'Keefe and Paul Williams. And then there's one Irishman, Andrew Brace, a Frenchman, Matthew Reynal, who's also been in the news, I guess, last year with the whole Bernard Foley. Did he waste time? Was he given clear enough instructions? Call. Nika Moshikele, the Georgian, and Jaco Piper, the single South African. So like I said, England is the biggest contingent, with a couple of Kiwis, a couple of Aussies, an Irishman, a Frenchman, a Georgian, and a South African. Now, it is interesting when you look at the list. As I said, a few guys, Nika Moshikele is obviously the youngest guy. He's obviously the only Tier 2 kind of representative. There's nobody who speaks Spanish amongst these guys, which is interesting, then, given that you've got several, Argentina, Uruguay, Chile, you've got several Spanish-speaking teams in the competition. I would have thought maybe a wee bone would be thrown to a Spanish-speaking ref, but since Federico Anselmi seems to have stopped getting the love, he's coming to the end of his career as well. If he is retired, I haven't seen the news of it, but I haven't seen him referee for a long time. No Spanish-speaking referees have been getting much in the way of kind of big-time internationals. So, yeah, that's just a bit of an interesting one. But there are a few guys who speak French. Obviously, Reynal speaks French, being a Frenchman, but he won't be allowed to be in charge of any French games. But, Wayne Barnes, Luke Pearce, Ben O'Keefe, and Matthew Reynal, as I said, I think they all give the old French a bit of a go. I'm kind of torn about the whole language thing, because all the captains have to speak some English. You're not always going to get a referee who speaks French. I feel like I would rather a referee who speaks one language, be it English, very, very clearly, and keep it simple. Don't use slang to be in charge of a game, than someone who's going to do maybe a bit of broken French. Wayne Barnes is even on the record saying some French-speaking players would rather he speak to them in English clearly than attempt to go with the French. Obviously, if their English is better than his French, then that would make things go a bit smoother. But if the guys have got the language ability, then why not use it? But it seems like French is the only kind of second language that any of these referees go with, apart from the likes of Raynal and Amashikali, who have English as their second language, which is kind of kudos to them. All these refs are pretty much, apart from Amashikali, either in their 30s or early 40s. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see kind of next crop of them, because as I mentioned, like Barnes is 44, Carley's 38, Dixon's 40, Berry's 39, Paul Williams is 38, Matthew Raynal's 41. So a few of these guys, this will probably be their last World Cup, but yeah. AR's Ridley, Piatti, Dolman, Busby, Evans, Ray, and Brosset. So a Frenchman there. Another Kiwi. James Dolman is one of the ones who got a Six Nations game to ref, but he's kind of been, I guess, demoted, or he's not managed to nail a refereeing job for the Six Nations. And then TMOs, Cronin, Foley, Yonker, McNeese, Neville, Pickerel, and Whitehouse. The only thing I would like to see from the TMOs mainly is just keep things snappy, eh? Sometimes the TMOs, because they've obviously got to kind of acquiesce to the decision of the referee, but sometimes they can be a little bit guilty of not being direct enough. Like the TMO's in the prime position to see what they're seeing. They just need to tell the ref what they're seeing, and then if the referee doesn't agree with it, then they're going to overrule them. But sometimes it's like, instead of just saying, no ref, you're wrong, they're like, let me just show you one more angle. Let me just rewind that for you again. Like that kind of stuff is annoying. I would rather them just be kind of direct. Sometimes I wish we couldn't hear what they were saying, because I feel like they would be more open with each other. They don't like correcting each other on the mic, but obviously it's also useful as a fan to kind of see them working through the process. A couple of refs that definitely got the demotion were Mike Adamson and Damon Murphy, who both refereed Six Nations games and don't get any kind of gig for the World Cup. I will not shed a tear about not seeing Mike Adamson. As I said, I don't usually care that much about refs. I never used to like Wayne Barnes after 2007, but he's grown on me since then. Luke Pearce, I think, makes a better ref than an AR, because I think he's a bit mouthy as an AR. He needs to kind of let the ref do his job. But Mike Adamson, I don't know if he's up to scratch, and I'm kind of glad that he's not at the World Cup. Damon Murphy. Holly Davidson is the other one that I've seen a lot of people mention, because she is genuinely classy. Look, if you're looking for a classy Scottish ref, you go with Holly Davidson for sure. Joy Neville's the only female on the panel, being one of the TMOs. But I did see someone mention on somewhere on social media that they may be saving Holly Davidson for a women's tournament, which is going to be running at around about the same time. So that may be the case, seeing as she refereed the Women's Rugby World Cup final, between England and New Zealand. So there you go. Those are your officials. What do you reckon? Anybody you think's been hard done by not being selected? Do you think it's a kind of... is it an important one that these guys learn a second language? They all seem to be going with the French, to be honest. I guess that makes sense for a lot of the European-based refs if they're going to referee like Champions Cup games and whatnot, because they're going to be in command of French teams. There's no Spanish-speaking element to it. There's the one tier 2 ref in the Georgian, but you guys let us know your thoughts. And I should say, if you like seeing people speak a second language, check out my new channel, 2 Cents on Tour. I was in China last month. I took my camera around and I went to see some stuff. For example, I went to see some bunkers. You can see the holes where the guys would have been shooting out of.
这里进去，然后有那种机枪口啊，那边有那个口。
是吧？很有意思。这个是二战的时候吧？ In Wuhan. Check it out. I will put a card up there and a link down there. 2 Cents on Tour. Speaking some Mandarin. I don't speak French, but I do speak a bit of Mandarin. So there you go. Cheers, guys, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. See ya.